Which camera do I look at? Okay.
I don't think you need to look at the camera.
Okay, shut the hell up, Fish.
Exactly.
Shut the hell up, Fish. How many times have you heard that over the years? Good. After a bad round? Ooh, boy. Okay. Is this okay?
Okay, that's good.
Is this okay?
Yes.
Yeah. What about this thing?
It's good.
You guys...
I put it there.
Hey you guys, Gabriel White here, represent the movement towards improve. Got my buddy, partner. What the f*** was that?
Don't worry about it. It's good.
Hey guys, Gabriel White here, represent the movement towards improvement, and welcome to another episode of the MTI podcast. Very excited for our guest tonight, Mr. Dave Woosley, who has caddied on the PGA Tour for 25 years. Also joining me as usual, my friend, partner in crime, Mr. Andrew Fisher, aka Fish Fit. So for this podcast, we really wanted to, get some insight from Dave's experience on the PGA Tour for 25 years. Dave has caddied for top 10 in every major, a few Ryder Cups, PGA Tour wins, and he's even been on the bag for a 59. The eyeballs that are in your skull, Dave, have seen some incredible golf. You have been part of some incredible golf history.
I have. I've been very fortunate. I started right out of college, and things just fell into place for me, although I didn't have any plan whatsoever.
That's cool. Can you share, what was the first year you started caddying on the PGA Tour, and what that experience was like starting out those first couple years?
Well, I finished college in 1979, and my folks gave me a pretty good bit of money at the time. I was hoping to go overseas, and I guess I had some wanderlust, but I couldn't quite make that happen. And my brother was in school out in California. This is 1980, and I went out there and got a job waiting tables and just living life. And this was like in October, November, and then the tour is going to start in January. And it just crossed my mind to. I'd caddied in the Greater Greensboro Open, which was a PGA event when I was in high school, just picking up a bag, and I felt comfortable on the golf course. And then the tour was going to start in January, and it occurred to me that I've never seen the United States. And so I made a couple of phone calls, and a friend of mine got a guy from North Carolina, Chip Beck, who was a very prominent amateur, played college golf, 4-time All-American in Georgia. So I called him out of the blue and just talked to him over the phone and told him who I was and started talking golf and that kind of thing, and asked, inquired about whether he had a caddy or not, and he didn't have one, and kind of went from there. He didn't even have a sponsor, so he offered me, believe it or not, $30 a day when he played. Not like $30 a day every day.
Only tournament round?
Yeah, 30, and I said I'll take it.
No practice round. Practice round free.
Well, I think those were included. Yeah, but I sent my luggage home, and I took a train to Phoenix, my first tournament of the year, and then took a bus to San Diego, and I was off and running.
Oh.
How did you like traveling, those first couple of years?
I loved it. I mean, frankly, I certainly cared about what my player was doing or not doing, but as far as my pleasure, just every week was a new week, and it was exciting to me. A few weeks later, I'm in Hawaii, and I'd never been west of Asheville, North Carolina, so I was just tickled.
That's awesome. Now, you said you called up Chip Beck, trying to get a job. Do you think that same scenario could happen in this day and age?
No chance, no chance. If I were starting now, I would try to do, maybe regional tournaments, like in North Carolina. They have the e-golf tour, and try to meet players out there. You'd be surprised at the quality of the play, and then go from there to the web.com, and you can make things work. And
so almost like a player who's trying to get to the PGA Tour starts out at those lower developmental tours, and then goes, maybe to a bigger tour like Canada or Asia or web.com, then to the PGA Tour. That's almost maybe kind of the process for a caddy nowadays.
In my opinion, it is, and that's what I would do. And you got to pay your dues these days, and caddying on the PGA Tour is like the top of the mountain, I guess you would say, and a lot of people want to do it. There's a certain sex appeal to it, I guess, and it can be a lot of fun. It's like a roller coaster actually, but if professional golf is what you're into, that's the place to be.
Now, you've caddied on tour, as you said, for 25 years. I bet you've seen a lot of caddies come and go. How do you think you were able to caddy for that long with the best players in the world? I mean, you have to be good at your job, I'm assuming, and do a great job, or else you'd be gone.
Well, I feel like that I was competent from the start. I was certainly comfortable, and in my first year, I was fortunate enough to work for a fellow by the name of Danny Edwards, and he won the last tournament of the year when I was caddying for him. It was actually a team event, and they don't have it anymore, but it was a big thing back then. Nicholas used to play in it, so the Walt Disney team event, and that pushed me into the next year, and just one thing after another.
You said Danny got his first win, and I
that was his second win, actually.
Second win.
Yeah.
I know you've caddied for some players getting their first win. How hard is it to get that first win, and does that do anything for the player after that?
Well, I would say that's probably the most difficult win to get, and particularly these days, the competition is so stiff, but it always has been very difficult, and it seems like there's a sort of ceiling that players have to break through. In my mind, that's just something that's made up. I feel like that if you're good enough to win, then you should win, and the process looks like you need to be getting on the leaderboard on a regular basis and take your lumps. A lot of mistakes are made, that kind of thing.
Now, do you try to convey that to the player
Completely.
Like right now, you're caddying for a kid fresh out of college, Hunter Stewart, and especially for you who's a veteran, you've been there and seen that like you're sharing. You think it's more of a state of mind, and do you try to convey that to the younger players that you can win right now, you can compete with these guys right off the bat?
Well, you need to be realistic and you need to be honest, and so I would never make anything up, so to speak. But it's interesting you would mention Hunter Stewart because I caddied for him in the 2014 Hilton Head event, and I'd never caddied for him before. He got in that tournament by winning an important event in South Carolina, and you got a spot in the tournament at Hilton Head, and he missed the cut by a shot, and made a bogey from the middle of the fairway on the last hole with a sand wedge, which was kind of crazy, and I just felt like he was very, very competitive, and at that time I knew what his record was like in college, and one of the things I just took him off to the side and I said, Hunter, this field has got to be 10 times better than any tournament you've ever played in. The quality of the field, the Hilton Head event's a high quality field, and he acknowledged that it was. And I said, well, you were very competitive. We should probably be about 30th place right now, except you don't have the experience out here. And he agreed with that. And I said, so my question is, why aren't you winning? Why aren't you winning college events? And his dad told me at a later time, that was a question that he didn't have an answer for. In other words, he felt like that he probably should be, and he just kind of went on from there to experience that in the college realm. But the players that I work for, if I see that and it's very obvious to me, it's something that I kind of like to talk about on a regular basis because I think it creates possibilities and expectation.
Sounds like it kind of has to do with their self-image on whether they see themselves as winners or deserve to win or should be winning. And sometimes, as I think you're talking about, coming on the tour without that experience, it's hard for them to have that state of mind. Coming right in, I feel like I can win. I feel like I should win. Maybe because these players have played these courses for so long that they've seen these guys win majors and win tournaments. They kind of may put themselves a little bit lower than they even need to. And I think I was even talking to some other players and caddies, and they see these young guys winning, and that allows the other young guys to feel like, hey, maybe I can do it too.
That's right. Yeah.
Talking about Hunter Stewart a little bit, what do you like about him in particular? I know you shared some stuff and kind of mentioned what type of players do you like to caddy for?
Well, he has a lot of confidence and he's very competitive, and he's a hard worker, and those are great qualities. Plus, in my opinion, he's pretty much has a world-class short game right now. So those are good attributes, and that translates well to the PGA Tour. And let's see, he to get into, for instance, the U.S. Open at Pinehurst, I caddied for him in Memphis, and I think he birdied 3 of the last 5 holes to get into a 5-way playoff. And then he was the last guy to get in to get a spot. He made like a 20-foot putt to Scott. It was between him and Scott Langley. So that shows the quality of competitiveness that he has. And then our first day at on Monday at the U.S. Open in Pinehurst, we were playing with Hunter Mahan and Bill Haas, and so he's thrown in the deep end of the pool right from the get-go, and he just took to it very well. And again, there he missed the cut by a shot, and I mean, right out of the blocks, that's very impressive.
For this tournament, over the Shriners Hospital, shot 1 over the first day, got what he could out of it, and then shot 3 under the second day, and made the 2-day cut, which I think is he's showing a pattern. He's not going to give up on a round or a tournament, which I think is very impressive to come out that second day, especially that's his first PGA tournament as a professional. So that's very cool.
Yeah, you mentioned this. We were talking in private, and you were saying that he's a slow starter.
Right.
And I found that kind of interesting, because some golfers come out and they blaze. They'll drop like a 6 under. But you kind of know they're going to burn out.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to fizzle out. They're going to run out of gas, and you see them finish almost in dead last.
Mm-hmm.
So slow starting can be good, but not too slow.
Exactly.
So as a caddy, you really gotta harness him and say, hey, the way you're used to playing, the way you're comfortable with playing, we have to expedite that a little bit, just a tad, so that we're making the cut. Because a lot of the it's a little intimidating. The best in the world come out firing. You see 6 and 7 unders, 8 unders after the first round. If you shoot 1 over, you feel like there's no chance. I really like the fact that he stepped up on that second day. So I think as long as the second day, that Friday, can be a day that he's actually aggressive, you're fine. As long as you're not too slow, having 2 bad rounds. So as a caddy, how do you kind of gauge that? I mean, not just for Hunter, but for the guys that are listening that actually they're used to starting slow. As a caddy, what can a caddy provide to really help them with that?
Well, I try to pay attention to their, I guess you might call it like an energetic body, kind of what it looks like and what it feels like. And so for me, I think with Hunter, sometimes there's certain players that kind of have to be shaken up a little bit until all their energy in their body is working in one direction. And I can't say that's exactly what's happening with Hunter, but you've got to be ready right from the start, or you'll get left behind. And I don't have any long-term or even short-term concerns about that with Hunter. This was his very first tournament as a professional. It's you've kind of climbed a mountain to get there, and then all of a sudden you're competing against the best players in the world. So it's going to take some time to get his footing, but I'm confident he's going to have a long and successful career.
Now, we talked about a little bit of, what are the character traits you like? You mentioned Hunter's really competitive. He's not going to give up. He's going to stay engaged and get what he can out of the rounds. Over your years of caddying, what's some of the negative traits that you didn't like when you caddied for certain players?
I've never thought about that. Well, I guess from the positive end, there's a certain capacity to focus, a certain ability to be resilient, to hang in there, to be competitive all the way through. Mistakes happen. If you have routines, pre-shot routines, your regular routines, certain dialogue, you should have that on every shot. It doesn't matter if you're, if you've made a mistake or two and you're putting for a double bogey. You want to see those just regular patterns and be tough enough to let go what's in the past. And I've also, back in the day, I haven't heard this recently, but back in the day, if a caddy was talking about a certain player and you hear somebody might say, well, this guy's got some dog in him, and that's not a compliment. You feel like when things get tough, they're going to fold.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like seeing any of that. That's difficult to address.
Well, I was watching with Fish up there at the tournament, watching Rickie Fowler, you know? He sliced one off the tee box into the right trees.
Yeah.
Hits it 20 yards into the tree, drops straight down, pitches out another 40 yards, hits it to 25 feet, makes his putt for par. You know, just like, there's a guy that just hit 3 bad shots, didn't give up, grinded over his putt, made it, went to the next tee, and he's 4 or 5 under for the tournament. And that's just what kind of, I guess, you know, I agree with. You know, I just saw a guy that just, he didn't give up. You know, he always was just going to give each shot his best effort, no matter, you know, how bad the previous one was. Dave, if you can go back to, you know, let's say even caddying for Chip Beck. I know you were on the bag with him when he shot his 59. Can you share a little bit about that experience and what it was like watching that round?
Yeah, well, he was, in my opinion, you know, competent at the highest level. We were playing in my opinion, the event itself was not bigger than him. And certainly this tournament in Vegas, it was like a birdie fest. And we were playing on a course that he'd never seen before. But anyway, there were going to be low scores there, and everybody knew that. And I've always tried to be just involved in what I was doing and not adding up what's been going on in the past. You certainly have an awareness of what's going on, you know, when your player's playing really well. And we played 9 holes. We played the backside first, and you had to walk across the parking lot to get to the first tee. And this caddy said, you know, I was kind of passing by. He said, "What did y'all shoot?" And I had to sit there and think for a minute, and then I said, "We shot 29." And the guy's name was Smiley. Smiley said, "Wow, you're going to the easier side now." And I was like, "Whoa." And I think Chip birdied the first 2 on our backside, but he you know, there was $1 million prize for the next 59, and he asked a tournament director, was that going to be in this tournament as well, since we weren't playing the regular course, and he was informed that we were. And I thought that was an interesting question. I wouldn't have wanted to know that. You just kind of keep going, but it was on his mind. And
So he knew that there was $1 million on the line?
yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy to me, Dave. And how does a player who's conscious of that know there's a 59 on the line? Because then that kind of takes your mind kind of off the shot and more on what the shot means.
Right.
And you kind of start jumping ahead towards the future. And,
That's right.
you know, how does one stay in the moment and embrace and not get scared?
Well, that, again, like I said, I was surprised at that question. And,
Yeah.
and you know, I don't know how to answer that except to say that Chip was just kind of lit up that day, and he actually ended up birdieing the last 3 holes to score a 59. But it's not something that I would recommend, and most of the players that I've worked for, they don't pay attention to leaderboards and stuff like that. They want to know, you know, like on the last hole, if they're like 1 shot or 2 shots up or something like that.
So after caddying for Chip Beck, where did you go after that?
He and I split up, and I got a job one of the times, you know, that I got off the tour for a couple of years, and I got off the tour and I worked in North and South Carolina selling golf apparel, and so I did that for a couple of years, and then I kind of stumbled back out years later. I didn't have any.
Yeah, what made you want to go back out?
Well, I didn't like selling golf apparel. I felt like I was traveling as much as, or maybe more than when I was on tour, and plus, you know, I was having to work Saturdays too, making phone calls for the next week, and I don't know. I've always liked caddying.
Gotcha. So caddying, how about this? What is, you know, one of the best parts about being caddy, PGA Tour, and what's one of the hardest things maybe, you know, you had to go through your time out there?
Well, I think it's an individual thing, you know, so I mean, I can't speak to what others would like about it, but I like the physicalness of it. I like the strategy. I like, you know, figuring out how to manage a golf ball around the golf hole and help players get the most out of their game. And I was a very good golfer in high school and college, but I never could get everything out of my game, so to speak. I knew I was a better player than what my scores were showing, and so when I'm working for a player, I'm always trying to figure out, you know, what's going on here and how can we get more out of it. So I really enjoy that. You know, the downside of it for me, to a certain degree is, well, it's obviously a downside. You're not in control of your own income, so to speak. But also, you know, as a caddy, I mean, when I get a paycheck, it says caddy. I'm not the sports psychologist, that kind of thing. So I can't be that. But that's my favorite part of it, trying to figure out what's getting in the way here and how can I motivate a certain player to move to the next level, and then I try to use that and kind of go in through the back door, so to speak. You know, because like I said, I can't be the psychologist, but you know, I've been a hand holder, and I've been, you know, kind of I've used very direct, aggressive language for players that I've worked for where I felt like they needed to hear that. And you know, I've only done that a couple of times, and I'm grateful that the players that I was working for, they knew that I was really in their corner 100%. I wasn't trying to provoke anything in a negative way.
Okay, so one question would be something I just thought of that a lot of people may not understand is, you know, when I see a caddy, I see him on TVs, caddying for the leaderboard, and the only thing I might see is him walk up to the ball and get a yardage. And you just mentioned a different dynamic to a caddy that a lot of people don't know about. Could you almost share what you think a good caddy is? Because there's I'm assuming multiple facets other than just out there cleaning clubs, getting yardages, reading greens.
Yeah, well, you know, certain players need certain things, and it's very obvious what's going on there. And it's not unusual for players to have an opportunity to win, and all of a sudden it seems like things are speeding up for them mentally, or they need help making decisions, clubbing decisions, that kind of thing.
I think also one of the things you mentioned is I feel like when I've talked to you, you sound very competitive yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you've talked about I want to win.
Right.
I want to win in majors. I want to win in PGA tournaments. Do you think that has been a strength for you as being a caddy? And do you see that lack in some other caddies?
Well, I guess you see that in every profession, and I think that I'm very competitive. I'm probably known as being like the nice guy, so to speak, but you know, when we get in the hunt, I really want to close the deal. I consider it a compliment. I'm certainly not arrogant, but I don't know how much, it was 07, had a chance to win in my hometown in Charlotte at the Wells Fargo, and a buddy of mine was telling me that he had spoken to his player, Kirk Triplett. Looks like Woosley's going to win another one. And then Kirk Triplett's response, this friend of mine said that I think Woosley has an arrogance about winning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
But I've always felt comfortable in those positions, and obviously you have to have a player that's competing at the highest level.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I could see, you know, for yourself, you know, being very competitive, wanting to win, and that'd be frustrating maybe if you have a player that's not like that, or not like that, fully embraces that type of mentality as well. You know, so that did you come across that when caddying for players, and was that hard to caddy for those types?
You know, I mean, the truth of it for me is these players, when you think of them as just people, they bring their own experience from their own place of origin, their own families, that kind of thing. And to me, it's not that unusual that players are out there, you know, maybe with a background that isn't, you know, the ideal background, so to speak. And so that can kind of get in the way of you know, free-flowing performance at the highest level. And so, yeah, there's those kind of issues I think can and should be addressed. But I think, you know, I mean, they're human beings just like, you know, you and me, and sometimes those issues are kind of intimidating, you know, maybe like self-esteem type stuff or a difficult background, that kind of thing. And I try to be genuine with the players that I work for and try to encourage them or suggest them, you know, to get help in terms of how their mind processes things when you compete, maybe sports psychologists, stuff like that, to get support. You know,
how much do you think for a player's results, you know, how their scores, is affected by those type of things, mental things, maybe it's relationships and family, finances, friends, like stuff that's going on outside of golf?
Yeah, Well, a story that comes to my mind, I worked for this player who was obviously good enough to win, kept coming close to winning, and couldn't seem to get the job done. And I set him up to go see this sports psychologist who was very well known. And every time that he was supposed to go, that he ended up having a reason not to go. And I was just kind of on him, so to speak, without trying to be riding him in a difficult way. And this was a very spiritual person. I don't want to say who it is. And at a certain point, he got frustrated with me, and he said to me, well, if God can't help me, who can? That's what he said to me. And I stood there for a minute, and I said to him, well, I mean, I'm a little bit spiritual myself, and I know his tradition is, the Bible and that sort of thing. And I said to him, and I think it might have been a good thing, I said to him, well, my understanding is that the God you're talking about through the Bible works through people. So how do you know God didn't talk to you like right now, saying you need to go see somebody, And soon thereafter he did, and we had success, and that was a good feeling for me. But that's the same guy who I got really upset with, on the course one time because of certain patterns that he had that kept repeating them, and so I tried to address those as well.
I think it's the stuff a lot of people don't see. Certain things like that's going behind the scenes. I think when you're watching a golf channel, you're seeing what the player's doing on the range, and you're talking to an instructor like Sean Foley or Butch Harmer for these little bits, and you don't see those struggles or those triumphs outside of the course that's affecting their play sometimes more than anything than the actual maybe instruction or practice sometimes.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Dave, from let's say the first few years of you caddying on tour to now, where do you think your role has changed as a caddy? Do you think your purpose, your strengths and your role have changed from then till now?
Well, it's certainly a much more high-profile position, but still the nuts and bolts of caddying is the same thing. And some players have like an entourage of sports psychologists, physiologists, those kind of things to help them out. But I don't see my role has changed very much at all, really. The equipment's different. The yardage books are, light years better than they used to be. And but you still have to put the hours in. You got to put the work in. And there's new technologies like aim point to help people if they have difficulty reading greens, that sort of thing. And you kind of have to stay on top of all of that. So I guess in that regard, it's changed, and the game itself is, more of a power game these days than it used to be in the past. But still, caddying is still caddying. You can still have an impact, and I think the smart players realize that, and they look for quality people to be around them.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're literally, it's a fascinating career because you're actually inside the ropes. You're actually competing. You're actually helping out. What other sport do you get to really be right there in the thick of it?
Right.
That's a really interesting dynamic that happens in the game of golf, and one that I love. We talked about that. At the end of the day, the reason caddying hasn't changed that drastically is probably because just hearing what you're saying, because it's about communication.
That's right.
It's still about your relationship. Technology can change. It can cap. It can do whatever it wants, but your mouth is going to be the best tool you ever have.
That's right.
Either keeping it closed or actually saying the right thing and knowing when to talk, So that's interesting.
And for me, I don't feel like I ever say anything that I can't justify. In other words, I'm not just guessing. If I disagree with my player and they ask me why, I can tell them why. It could be a variety of reasons, and then of course your player makes the decision, and I support that 100%.
So it sounds like you have an immense amount of experience, and you've probably worked for, I don't even know how many guys. Do you know the number off the top of your head? Like just even counting just guys who work for just a little bit?
Probably 20 or more.
20 more
like
top ranked players in the world.
Right.
It's just kind of, you've been to some of the most beautiful golf courses in the world. Do you have a favorite?
Well, I think for my favorite is Augusta.
Good.
Yeah, but I think it's just because of the repetitive nature that you go back to that event year in, year out. And it doesn't, obviously it's changed a lot over the more recent years, but the history of players, back, I mean, how early did it start? Was it the 30s or 40s, or Ben Hogan or Bobby Jones up to now? It's to watch what players do on that course, and it's still is such a compelling event, and particularly the backside on Sunday, that kind of thing. And so I haven't done particularly well there. I've had a top 10 there, but I just love that tournament itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a neat venue. You think about that in golf, we change locations all the time. There isn't a major championship that stays in one location except for the Masters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of nice because you can just step on the tee and know that Ben Hogan went through here, Sam Snead. That's really cool. There's a lot of nostalgia there.
Right.
And that's very cool.
I would never want to spectate there. I mean, the place gets jammed up. But to caddy there, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So you worked for all these guys, and we got about halfway through your experience. I was just wondering, we can kind of finish off that story a little bit. Tell us a little bit about who you worked for next, and what was your next win, and kind of to present day, kind of.
Right. Yeah. I got off the tour, then I came back and I worked for a guy named Michael Clark, and he had won Quad Cities, and I worked for him for the better part of a year, and then. I'd never worked the Q school, and I always wanted to try everything. So I got a fellow by the name of Ian Leggett to work at Q school, and he was an interesting guy, Canadian fellow, and he finished 5th at Q school, which was kind of surprising. And Michael Clark he was a tournament winner, but I personally didn't feel like I was helping him any. And I called him and I just let him know I was basically going to make a change because I didn't feel like I was adding to what he was doing. And then I ended up working for Ian Leggett, and he won on the west coast. He won the Tucson event, and I stayed with him for a while. Worked for Brad Elder. I got off the tour. There were actually times prior to that where I worked for guys like Jeff Sluman and Mike Reed. Those kind of players. Great guys, great players. I think the time that when I got off, I came back, I worked for a young guy named Aaron Barber, and he was a wonderful guy, but, I felt like he was, didn't feel like he was heading in the right direction, and then somebody approached me and asked if I'd be interested in working for Aaron Overholser, and frankly, I had been off the tour, I didn't know who he was. I asked, can you give me a day, and I talked to some guys, and anyway, it turns out I was happy to say yes to Aaron, and I worked for him for about, I'd say, 5 or 6 years, and he's currently doing stuff for the Golf Channel. He's kind of found a niche there, but he's just a wonderful guy, all heart, really tough competitor, and we had some really good years, and he got hurt, and he had 2 or 3 surgeries, and at the time, this was 2007, he was going to go in for like a final little surgery on his wrist to clean it up. And I think we were ranked 23rd in the world at that time. And he had just finished, I want to say like 15th in Akron, 15th in Akron, finished 4th in the PGA out in Oklahoma, Tulsa, I guess it was. Finished 2nd at the Deutsche Bank. With Tiger and Aaron were 2nd to Phil Mickelson, so he was playing at a really high level. In fact, I felt like he was underperforming at 23rd in the world. But anyway, he went in for this minor surgery that turned out to not really work, and one thing led to another, and a couple years later, he's off the tour, and it was very difficult for him, but that's just the way things worked out.
Wrist injury?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you share, first off I want to ask you said you worked 5 to 6 years for Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
First I want to ask is that rare for a caddy to work that long for a player? And 2, if you can just share, just maybe a couple experiences that went well in a couple tournaments for you guys.
Yeah, I do think that is a long time to be together with one player. But I was that way with Chip Beck and other players as well. And so, I don't know, I just like that. And I just loved working for Aaron. I thought he had a lot of game. I actually thought he was going to win a major. And, the one, I guess he did win sort of his major. His major would be Pebble Beach because he was from the Bay Area. He's from San Mateo, and we went there. And I caddied there a lot. And like Chip Beck was a great player. We never did anything there. But caddying for Aaron there, he's very skillful on the Poana greens and the heaviness of the air. And he taught me that the way to play those courses is you never hit a full shot. 3/4 shots, half shots, taking extra clubs, that kind of thing. And I worked for him there 3 tournaments. We finished 6th, 4th, and 1st.
Wow.
So that's very impressive. And the one thing that's kind of humorous that at least to me was I was trying to, as I said, talk to my players about trying to create something before you get there. And I was telling Aaron that it's not as hard to win out here as you think it is. When you finally win out here, you'll see that. And I said that probably 2 or 3 times over the course of a few years, and because I saw that in him, actually, like I said, I didn't just make that up. And when he finally did win, he won by 4 shots, 4 or 5 shots, and in my opinion, he didn't play that well on Sunday. So after the whole thing was over, I'm kind of like in his face, and I'm like, was I right? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, it wasn't as hard as you thought it was.
Yeah.
It was gonna be, right? And he looked at me and he goes, I don't know what tournament you were caddying in, but that's the hardest damn thing I've ever done. So I thought that was funny, and I was a little bit disappointed, but I figured over time that would change for him because he was such a good player.
Now you also mentioned injuries.
Right.
How important is it maybe for the longevity or the sustainability of a player to stay healthy?
Right.
How much do you think injuries affect a player's performance and maybe even their career?
Right. Well, Aaron seemed to be, he had surgery on the opposite wrist, I want to say 4 or 5 years prior. So, when what happened to Aaron, he had like what do they call it, like a micro fracture or something like that for surgery. So when he went into that, he had already had previous successful experience straightening this one, wrist thing out. And so that's why he went and did it. And unfortunately, it didn't work. But I think that, it's a new day, and it's been a new day now for like 15 years to where players are very much conscious of working out, staying in good shape year round. And because these young guys that are coming out, they're good to go right from the start. And so you've got to take care of your body. You've got to watch what you eat. You've got to pay attention to the energy, around you, that kind of thing. I think it's hugely important.
You think more players are doing that now, and do you also see maybe some players overdoing the workouts?
I do think more players are doing that now. For some reason, I'm reflecting on Webb Simpson, because I worked for him his first year. I worked maybe four tournaments. His regular caddy was out for, can't remember why, but I remember at that time I was asking him, what's your favorite food? And he said McDonald's. And I was like, oh my gosh, and a couple of years later, he's very healthy. He and his wife are very healthy. And so, I think there's plenty of players who try to skirt these issues, but sooner or later it catches up with them. But players do overdo it, right? I mean, you would know more about that than me.
Yeah, absolutely they do. But they're at the mercy of whatever they're told to do. It's kind of like they're just kind of shuffled into one area and then to another. I mean,
right. I
don't think a lot of players have been around it long enough. Not yet. You got to give it another 10 years or so. But even guys like Webb Simpson, they didn't. He's young, but he didn't grow up with this working out, golf fitness mentality.
That's right.
These younger kids they're probably about 15 now that have just been doing it their entire career.
Mm-hmm. I think Tiger played a role in that. I think he was working out early in his career.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he definitely did. He definitely moved the needle, but I think that a lot of guys didn't care. I felt that way. I saw Tiger. A I saw Tiger working hard in 2000, 2001. I didn't see guys working as hard as he did until probably 2007, maybe 2008. It's like,
Well, you're talking about
6-7
early in
years.
Tiger's career.
Yeah, I mean, he was getting after it then, and now, I mean, it took 8 years for the players that already are on the tour to be convinced that that was something they were doing, even though he was winning.
Well, I was out on tour, you know, I don't know, decades prior to Tiger coming out. And I remember, you know, guys like Curtis Strange or Payne Stewart, you know, great players, you know, the Europeans, Faldo, stuff like that. And I think it was a common seeming, you know, dialogue that there were so many good players, great players at that time compared to like previous generations, that a topic of conversation is there going to be a great player in the future? And it felt like that was going to be, you know, less and less of a possibility. But in my view, you know, this is an individual sport. There's always going to be somebody that dominates, and it turned out to be Tiger. And I feel like that Tiger had like a head start, so to speak, just in the mentality of what you know what it takes. And so kind of when he was off and running, everybody else was starting to play, or had to play catch up, which is kind of what you're referring to.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true now, you know. But
Well, things had to be in place. That system had to be in place. You know, Tiger was doing this on his own. He had
That's
a lot of
right.
money. He could afford to have his own private trainer traveling with him, and that just wasn't something that people had. Now, the tour has trailers. You know,
Right.
they have physio trailers. They have workout fitness trailers for the players.
Right.
Free.
I think that's a really good point that I never thought of, is that, you know, when Fish was talking about Tiger was working out, he was doing that by himself.
Mhm.
You know, and maybe what Fish is I'm almost getting at is that until 2000, 2008, the only reason some of these other players started working out is because maybe people like TPI and other systems were put into place that kind of forced the players, or became a business for the players to utilize. Because it also brings up another good point, is that there's a lot of players on tour, PGA Tour, that don't work out, that don't watch what they eat. So maybe at the end of the day, it's always going to come down to self-discipline thing. You know, why does one player feel like the need to work out and the other one doesn't?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I was just gonna say convenience.
Hmm.
Convenience is why a lot of the players on the PGA Tour now work out.
Mhm.
It's become accessible to them.
Right.
They can go into a trailer, they can get an adjustment, or they can go for a little quick muscle activation workout, and then go. If those trailers weren't there, they would have to find their own gym. They would have to wake up an hour and a half earlier than expected. You know, you got to really be dedicated
Right.
to wake up at 4:30 in the morning
Right.
to actually get ready for your 7 o'clock tee time.
Right.
And Tiger did that.
And you know, you're talking about change and the way things evolve, and for some reason I'm reflecting back, and you know, when I was working for Chip Beck in probably the late 80s, early 90s, we played a practice round with Jack Nicklaus at Augusta, and we were talking, and I was, you know, asking him about, you know, what's your target on this hole, what's your target on this hole, and I remember like the third hole, for instance, that short par 4, he talked about just going to the middle of the green, and if the pin's back right, you putt it from there. And if the pin is kind of front left downhill, you putt it from there. And you know, 10 years later, with Oberholzer, well, it's more than 10 years, we played practice rounds there with Mickelson a couple times, and he was talking about targets, and I was telling him, you know, well, this is what Nicklaus, you know, told me, wait here. And you know, Phil just kind of chuckled, and he said, you know, you can't do that now, you'll get run over. And with guys like Tiger, and it's just changed, and that's right.
It's interesting though that legacy and those stories can be passed along through caddies. I think this is an interesting point. The longevity of a career of a caddy can be much longer
Mhm.
than a player. Not always the case, but we see players come and go. David Duval, okay, #1 player in the world, unstoppable in the Tiger era. Now, he's working for the Golf Channel. You know, his game's not quite where it used to be. So say that, you know, caddies, guys that caddy for David Duval, they're still on the tour.
That's right.
Those stories can be passed along. You guys have a much longer career span or the opportunity to have a longer career
Right,
span
right.
than a player. You know, I see players constantly changing, having to keep their cards. Tour caddies, they don't have to go anywhere.
Right. But you know, the challenge for a caddy is relating to these young players, you know, and so if you have a history where you can say, well, this is what so-and-so did, And, actually for me, I've experienced a lot of failure as well, and you learn a lot from that too. You see players that, you feel like they could be or should be, better than they are, that kind of thing. Or the mistakes that I've made as a caddy, you learn from that kind of stuff, and you can kind of steer younger players in a better direction that's, more fruitful.
Yeah, I mean, that's really kind of what they're paying for. They're paying for all of your previous mistakes
Yeah,
that are actually now as knowledge.
right,
Knowledge that they can utilize.
right,
I mean, it's great to have your buddy on the bag. Someone you're relatable, you can talk to, friendly, you guys know about the same TV shows. But at the end of the day, this is a business.
right,
It's professional.
right,
You get out there, you've got veteran caddies, veteran players that know this course. You're kind of thinking to yourself, ooh, this is my business.
yeah,
It's cool to have my buddy on the bag and talk to him, but man, at the end of the day, I'd rather have a caddy who knows this course, has the knowledge, has seen it, and is comfortable in a really pressure situation.
mm-hmm.
Oh, I was just gonna say, kind of just off that same topic, I'm sure the tour has kind of evolved in that way from, let's say, the mid 1980s, the mid 1990s. It wasn't seen, it wasn't viewed as so much as a business, So maybe players are taking things more seriously now. And I was gonna maybe ask you on that topic, when you see some players with a sports psychologist, with a personal trainer, with the manager, with the caddy, they got 3 to 6 people around them. Do you think that really helps a player a lot, or do you think that's more there for a security thing or more for a comfort to have? I mean, do you think that really affects a player's performance?
It's like an individual thing. So for some reason, I'm thinking about Jordan Spieth, and when I look at him and I read articles about him, it seems to me like he's taking the right steps. He's not taking monumental leaps. His games obviously has, but when some of the things that I've read about him, and like little things like paying attention to his sleep and adjusting what he eats and feeling, having an awareness of the energy in your body when you're trying to compete, in these events that he's in. Also having family and friends around, and yet when they're around, I think there's a rule where we're not going to talk any golf. The capacity to get away from it and stay grounded, those kind of things. Like it's an individual thing. I've worked for a player recently who had, all of that, and yet I don't feel like it helped them very much, just because the focus wasn't there, that kind of stuff, and so it was almost like ornamental,
It can be a distraction.
right,
It definitely can. I've always said that golf is kind of like an evergreen tree, and the PGA Tour is like a Christmas tree. It's very distracting. There's lots of new equipment, and there's flashy, bright ornaments all over the place, and there's lots of presents and money, and you get distracted. At the end of the day, this is just golf. You
right,
start putting interpreters up there and translators, and you name it, from sports psychologists to physiotherapists to chiropractors, massage therapists. That gets hard, and time management becomes really, really important. And plus, they're raising a family, and they have kids out on the road a lot of times.
right,
Most these players do. They bring their families out.
right,
So you can allocate time to everybody. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself one question: is where's my time? So much is being taken from these players now,
Mhm.
and it's an energy exchange. There can't be much to be given.
right, and it's a selfish game. It requires a lot of time and a lot of, having the athleticism and the capacity is one thing, but it's the repetition, and it's the repetition of the right stuff too. Trying to repeat the right mental processes and routines and seeing results, and then adjusting all that stuff.
Well, it sounds like what you're talking about is it's a holistic game, and then what you're also kind of saying, it needs to be personal to the player. Some player might not need something that another player needs, and so they have these people here to work with them that doesn't really relate specifically to what that player needs. So I think that's interesting that Jordan Spieth would be working not on just his golf game, but his sleep, his food, where his family and friends play a role in his life, which
Support,
is support, and then also the repetition, which I think is very funny, because when you see golfer practice, I don't know if many of the viewers know, but they're doing the same stuff every day. They all might have their own putting drills, but they're hitting those same 100 putts from 5 feet. Phil Mickelson's always doing his little drill around the hole, and I think what most people don't understand is it's doing the right things, and it's doing it a lot. So when it comes to tournament time, it's so subconscious at that point.
Right.
Tournament time's to let go. And as you've seen, Dave, I've seen some players, tournament times, they're thinking so much. There's so much in their head. They're so conscious, And like Fish said, it could all be a circle of, with the new 3D technology and the new TrackMans and the new, the terminology of the game has changed. Back in the day, Butch, Harvey Penix were teaching the best players in the world, and they were talking about, swinging buckets and brooms and,
Sweep.
Yeah.
Feel that. Move that body weight, transition, tempo.
Exactly.
Where now, we have lateral slide. Let's get that kind of lateral bend. We got some kind of, owner. You're just getting very technical in all aspects of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you that, Dave. I mean, from you being around, being able to see different players on the range, working on different things, how much do you think this new technology and this new age of instruction really influences a player to play better?
Well, I mean, it still comes down to, moving a little ball around a giant field in an efficient manner, and so you have to have the proper, you have to have the proper technique and the proper fundamentals, and but the new technology and the new instruction, that kind of thing, is going to find its way to the player, or the player is going to find its way to that, and again, it's. You've got to have the drive, to address all the proper things and to keep moving forward in this game, and it's really it's a very stiff challenge.